It is our pleasure to introduce our moderator for this session, Dr. Thiraset Parapong, former officer at the Ministry of Interior, independent executive, and leadership coach. Please give him a warm welcome.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, honorable monks, and of course the organizers, the great organizer for bringing us here together, and especially Ajahn Dan, my beloved Ajahn. Of course, guys, this morning we were learning about individual peace and mind. Individual, you know that you have peace when you know that you have good body, you have good hearts, and also you have good spirits, because only strong body is not enough. And then we move to a bigger scale, like a house. We talk about the inclusive and harmony. This morning, me and my wife, we talked, but sometimes we talk in different tones. The harmony is shaken. This is the same house. We are different already. But think about bigger scale like communities, bigger scale like nations, like countries. People are different from each other. So harmony is something opposite to disparity, of course. So now this session, we have the topic on community peace building, inclusive and harmonious society while addressing disparity. How can this thing put together when we have to put inclusive and harmony and talk about differences? This is really interesting topics. And we have of course, we have to cover all the key aspects like community play roles. So how the community play roles in embracing the difference while addressing the harmony and inclusive. We also have to cover the strategy for fostering dialogue. We talk, we communicate. We also have the key elements of value on how can we promote within the communities. We also have empower an example of the successful case, and of course the cultural historical factors that impact community peace building efforts. And how can this factor be leveraged for positive change? So now we have the speakers as we have here, 6. May I invite all the 6 so you can see how the 6 speakers are. Dr. Layne Hartsell, research professors at the Asia Institute and at the Center of Science, Technology and Society Department of Philosophy, Chulalongkorn University. Let's call him Mr. Professor Layne, please. Floor is yours.
Well, first of all, I should ask, can you hear me in the back over there? Can I see at least one person say they can hear me? Okay? Is it clear? Okay, I see it. I'm going to take the time today to talk to you about the concept of civilization. And well, first of all, I want to thank the speakers I watched from in the room about the trees and being able to talk to a tree, and then with the nonviolent accompaniment, which is an old story going way back, and of course with Mahatma Gandhi. So both of these stories I'm quite familiar with as a regular member of society. Today I want to talk to you about more from the field of expertise that I work in, called 3E, which is Energy, Economy, and Environment. It's a project that came out of Tsukuba University in Japan in the early 2000s, and then we kind of continued this with the Asia Institute in Tokyo. When I came to Thailand in 2014, I should make just a quick comment, is that I'm a research fellow at the same department, but not a professor any longer, but nevertheless, I'm still out here speaking and talking. The question of civilization comes to mind when we think about big systems, energy, economy, and of course the natural environment, and we call this human ecology. Ecology being how the organism participates within the natural environment. So there are different kinds of ecologies. I'm talking about human today because I'm speaking to a group of humans, and maybe sometime I'll get a chance to talk to the trees more in the forest and to the elephants and so forth. The intellectual heritage of the what we call the Neolithic Revolution. The urban revolution goes back about 5,000 years. If you have read the myth or the Epic of Gilgamesh, the foundational text of the founding of civilization there in Europe, just above the Persian Gulf, Mesopotamia and so forth, everyone has heard the particular myths and the stories. In the story, the Gilgamesh is accompanied by Enkidu, his sidekick, and they go and they cut down the trees and they take the trees back to the city. This is the definition of urbanization. So it's an extraction of natural resources to take back to urban centers. And if you follow this up through 5,000 years, it comes to Athens. You can see Plato writing about Plato was there in the Grove at Athens, and so I'm going now towards Western history and civilization. He talked about it, then followed Father Tertullian, the founder of Western Christianity, also talked about the same thing. Our numbers have become burdensome on the earth, writing 1,800 years ago, and we need to do something about it, basically. We have cities, the lands are tilled, the forests are cut down 1,800 years ago. But what I want to talk to you about today is from 1950 until right now. So Will Steffen, the great climate scientist who actually just passed away in the pandemic, he and his team, usually these days when we write scientific papers, we're writing with teams of like 25 people, sometimes 50 people are on these papers. So when we see the scientific papers today, a lot of the time, it's a massive collaborative effort. It's not, say, like in the 17th century or the 18th century anymore. Things are so complex, although there are, of course, individual papers being written. What I want to get at, though, is what Will Steffen and his group came up with is this concept of the Great Acceleration. And many people know this as the Anthropocene. So the Anthropocene, anthro meaning man or humans, and the type of geological epoch. So you have the Holocene before and now the Anthropocene. Now again, this is a geological term, but it also has political connotations. So to find a geological epoch or time, it takes quite a bit of information. And we look in the stratigraphic areas of the sediments, that you see in the, like in the rivers and the mountain and so forth. It takes time to find that, but the reason why we can see a strict delineation between the Holocene and the Anthropocene is because of nuclear fallout. So from the 1940s and 1950s on up to the 70s, there are a lot of nuclear testing, and we can see that stratigraphic record of the nuclear fallout in the sediment. So that's how we get the Anthropocene. I want to talk directly, and I know we don't have a lot of time, about the ideology of the Anthropocene, not so much the science. So if you have a kind of urbanization system coming about with what Francis Bacon in the 17th century, at the beginning of sciences, not Galileo. Galileo was a bit earlier, and it was a kind of anti-authoritarian movement based on the senses and quite democratic. By the time it went to Bacon and on up from there, it was a fairly authoritarian type system and an authoritarian techniques. And his idea was that we have an imperium of man. Man dominates nature. It's not you've heard man dominates nature, but maybe you didn't know exactly who it came from. But this idea comes from, of course, Gilgamesh, but I'm talking about Francis Bacon and Western culture. And now we come to a point in history when the UN says, if we take the UN as an authority, which I do, that we are at a critical point in history. I don't need to say much more about that to people that are planting trees, that are looking at the information of CO2 as it increases in the environment. We've passed 420 ppm going up for CO2. The temperature has touched 1.5 degrees Celsius, come back a little bit. It takes a while before that actually goes above. But interestingly enough, at the polar ice cap, it's 3 degrees. It's touched 3 degrees and come back down. So there's different aspects around the globe that of the Earth system scientists and what they're looking at. The question that we come to a global system, a planetary system of an urban technical system, we want to call it, maybe an urban city network, a city network kind of thing. 58%, before the pandemic, about 58% of people were living in cities. It probably dropped back a bit because whenever pandemics come in, people flee the cities, right? But I think this time they're kind of coming back. COVID, it's dangerous, but it was dangerous. Delta virus was pretty dangerous, Delta strain, but it's not like, say, MERS, M-E-R-S, or the Black Death. You get something like one of those and civilization's gone. With COVID-19, of course, all of the craziness came out, all of the control and all of that kind of stuff came out with a fairly, not benign, but a fairly low risk virus, I would say, for most people. But for people that are immunocompromised and living in a civilization type context, it's very dangerous. Very dangerous because we have poor industrial design. The industrial design and also the response, such as in the United States, is not up to what the public health experts would say. So for example, President Trump, during his tenure, he cut pandemic spending on the safety system that's in place that can deal with the pandemic. So basically we lost about 600,000 people almost immediately within those first couple years. That may be 1 million, I'm not sure. Not anything to be very proud about. But these are the outcomes of, I think, civilization. The intrusion onto nature, pandemics, viruses coming up. Virologists are looking at this 24/7. Even as we speak, there are viruses, new viruses that are coming up that we can see. I see people shaking their heads. If you're a scientist, you know what's going on. But most people are probably oblivious to a lot of this information. So the question is, I just use the pandemic as one example. There's pollution, there's water, soil, air pollution, there's a problem of cars and all of that kind of thing. But the question was, from Professor Koenigsegg, is what can we do? So I have a short list of things that we can do, and then concerning peace, I usually don't speak about peace in public because I'm not an expert in peace theory, but I published a paper with Japanese philosopher Junichiro Tanabe, and he had called me and said, I want to write something about peace theory and liberal peace theory and a critique from Buddhist philosophy. So I want to give mention to that for a more individual and interactional kind of perspective. So obviously for civilization, so these like big systems, we need a new energy structure, and we needed it 40 years ago or more. Clean, renewable energy has to come about, or, quoting the scientists, it's game over. That's James Hansen, not me. So it'd be game over for the environment. But the other things, what things can we do specifically? I talk about rematerialization, reorientation, and some psychological aspects. So I talk about reorientating away from civilizational mindset to bioregionalism. It's not that we're going to get rid of cities or civilization. In fact, I hate to say this, and it's very difficult to say in public, but it looks like civilization is going to take care of itself. It's going to take itself down, unfortunately. Why can't we reorientate our psychology, our psychological sense of security, sense of belonging to nature instead of to technical artifact, and still use nature? We talk about harmony, of course. Use nature, or not use nature, interact with nature in a way that's more harmonious. It can be done. There's a lot of people working on this. And believe it or not, planting trees and starting with things like rewilding is fundamentally necessary to this kind of approach. So when I talk about rewilding, that would be the first one. Rematerialization. If the nanotechnologists, now I'm going to go kind of out sci-fi for you here. If the nanotechnologists can scale nanotechnology to the point where you can print using molecules, using atoms, then you can cut down on the extraction. So again, I'm not saying that we're going to get rid of cities. I don't think that's going to happen. But if you can cut this extractive chain of process from the earth into the cities, this is what I think needs to be done. So if you look on Star Trek, what is his name, Jacques Chirac? He goes and he tells a nano printer, please print me a cup of Earl Grey tea. Something like that would be nice to have. Re-urbanization with the re-villaging within cities, bringing urban gardens into the cities, and then rural regeneration. These are the overarching aspects. And then, how is my time looking? Am I going over? I tend to be one to go over, but I have my watch here. How much time do I have? About 1 minute. So I want to just take 1 minute to talk about what we did with the actual peace theory. Is we posed the question to ourselves, okay, there's Ukraine going on. This was before October 7th and the war in the Middle East. And we asked ourselves, okay, well, how would you deal with a situation like that? We thought that was too big. So we tried to think of something that could be done with general citizens under regular conditions. And we came up with the idea, of course, from Buddhist philosophy, the self. Now I'm switching over to philosophy, so allow me a lot of this in 10 minutes. The Buddhist self is a non-fixed self. The term is emptiness, but it's a little bit difficult in Western terms. But if you can think of a non-fixed self and a fixed self that has constant arising of mental states, physical states, and so forth. And if you can think of society as a similar kind of arising constantly of different states of arrangements of matter, of people, and so forth, then if we could develop a deliberative democracy type of interaction with other people, approaching it from a type of Buddhist philosophy and the perspective on the self, then when we enter into dialogue with other people, when we interact with nature, we don't interact from a position of a disembodied self. Disembodied self would be like a kind of spirit hanging above the body and the body's kind of dangling under and so forth. But we would be interacting as an embodied self that's non-fixed. And I think that this could be one addition to liberal peace theory, which I think liberalism is good, but it's become quite contentious, especially in the United States. If you look at my country, not any model to talk about today. But what you can see if you look closely, there is a deliberative democracy going on at the grassroots, pushing up. And that's causing a bit of sanity within the United States, and also, I think, within the world, when you look at La Via Campesina, when you look at with the people that are protecting the trees and the water and the limiting the extraction and so forth. So if my message today is not so much scientific, but a request to maybe inquire into a reorientation towards bioregionalism, and also for those that are doing samadhi or meditation, is working to see the self and others in a relational sense rather than an abstract sense of separation.
And that was a fine touch. Solve all the global problem with the reorientation. The message was so strong. Thank you very much.